Hi, everybody, and welcome to our special edition of the 40 Years Later episode. Today is September 17th, 2020, which marks 40 years ago that Carla and Vickie went missing. Thank you all for joining us. We are your hosts today, Amelia, Courtney, and Lainie Sullivan. Thank you again for joining us. This special episode is going to be broken up into 2 or 3 segments, and we will be hosting a few special guests. So thank you for joining us again, and enjoy.
Awesome. So the facts, we wanted to go into a little bit of the background and just remind you guys of the facts of the case. 40 years ago today, Carla Atkins and Vickie Stout went to a store called The Furnace, just up the road from their house. And they were last spotted talking to a man in the blue truck. It was September 17th of 1980, and the final time that they would have been seen alive.
So Carla Atkins and Vickie Stout had skipped school for presumably the second day in a row. Vickie's boyfriend, Randall Riggins, and the girl's brother, Randy, along with another guy named Bobby Morgan, were supposed to report to the Stewart County Jail to begin serving a sentence for marijuana possession. There's a possibility that the girls were supposed to testify in another criminal case in Paris, Tennessee, the following day. That would be on the 18th. So there is also a possibility that day that Vickie had told her boyfriend, Randall Riggins, that she could possibly be pregnant. Mm-hmm. So on that eventful afternoon, the girls hitched a ride with Vickie's boyfriend, Randall, who may or may not have been in jail after they turned themselves in. That is still to be determined. He was on the jail log that he was still in jail, but an eyewitness saw him later on that afternoon. Randy, as you may have seen or heard in our podcast early on, the brother Randy Stout says Randall did not stay in jail, but others have said Randall did stay in jail, and the jail log shows that he was still in jail. Mm-hmm. But the eyewitness says Randall had the girls in a yellow-green van with him at the store. So the eyewitness saw Randall and Carla and Vickie in the green van with him at the store. Later, the girls were seen walking on foot. That the girls did not get back in the van with Randall. Randall went one direction, and the girls left walking out of the store. So the girls were seen walking to the Furnace. So after they left the IGA, they were walking to the Furnace, another local convenience store where they were reportedly buying snacks and or cigarettes. So they were last observed talking to a man in a blue truck. So one eyewitness saw the girls talking to a man in a blue truck. And also, too, we want to report some new information that we received over the last few weeks. Someone called in to tell us that there was a second eyewitness that saw the girls talking to the man in the blue truck, that allegedly this woman was driving a car and she saw the girls talking to the man in the blue truck, and that allegedly she called and reported this, and then allegedly David Hicks came to her house and told her that she should not report this to anyone else, that she was an older woman living alone and that harm may come to her if she reported this. So again, allegedly, David Hicks told her not to report this. So this is more than one eyewitness that saw the girls talking to the man in the blue truck. And as you may or may not remember, David Hicks was sheriff at the time. And so it was a pretty strong statement coming from him at the time, if that is to be the truth. And so this woman took that to heart, and she took it as though he was giving her great advice, if that is true. She felt as though maybe she would be in harm if she reported that.
Mm-hmm. So then later on that day, when their mother realized that they hadn't come home from the store, she called to report them missing. And when she had reported them missing, Sheriff David Hicks, quote, said, "I am going to kick their butts when I find them. I believe that they just were out running around. And when we get them, we'll bring them home," type thing. And then the next morning, the girls still had not shown back up. The truancy officer had shown up because they were not in school. And that's when they were able to really start the documentation of reporting the girls were missing. And from that point on, every day, every hour, they were just waiting on that phone call in order to find out that the girls had been found. They had heard rumors that girls had been spotted in different locations. So it was just an ongoing, just minute by minute, anxiety-driven time period for the family and for their friends. And then on October 5th, 18 days after the girls went missing, their bodies were discovered by hikers in the Lost Creek area of land between the lakes. It's about 5 miles from where Carla and Vickie lived in a mobile home with their mom and their younger siblings. Police were dispatched to the scene, and according to sources, violations of police crime scene protocol supposedly occurred, including TBI agent Jack Charlton allegedly improperly bagging multiple pieces of evidence and placing them all in a large trash bag. The bag subsequently came up missing after, by his own account, when his car was broken into and the evidence was stolen. The murder scene was just a few hundred yards away from the house where Carla and Vickie had once lived. Eerily, their uncle Joe Stout was just down by the hill getting some water from the spring that was right there at the base of the hill. And he heard shots late in the afternoon of the day that the girls disappeared and went missing. Joe also saw both a blue truck and a brown car racing out of that area of the Lost Creek and going very quickly. There were Stout encouraged to no avail police to search the area after learning his nieces were missing. So he didn't know at the time that they were missing, obviously, because it was that day. But he did realize after the fact that maybe there was something connected there. Autopsies were performed on the bodies at the Memphis Crime Lab. The cause of death was obviously homicide. Specifically, both Carla and Vickie were shot in the back of the head with a shotgun. The bodies were badly decomposed and really no evidence of any kind of sexual assault or any kind of harm was really able to be ascertained at that point in time. The girl's brother, Randy Stout, was still in jail on the marijuana charges when he learned of the terrible news from law enforcement.
He opened up the door, probably 2 foot, and said, "Randy, come here a minute." I knew right then. Didn't nobody have to tell me, God already did. And I walked up. He said, pointed down the hallway, said, "Randy, let's go down there in my office. I need to talk to you." If I was going first, him behind me, David Hicks, the 4 cops behind him. We go in his office at the end of the hallway. We all get in there. He says, "Randy, we found your sister's bodies. They've been murdered." And I went nuts. I tore that office all apart.
So throughout the years, the case would grow cold, but through persistence of the family, law enforcement would from time to time revisit this investigation. But the case really heated up in 2013 when the Pot Neck News, an online Dover-based news blog site, ran Tim Webb's alleged account of what happened. The story was published following Webb's suicide, and it implicated a suspect for the double murder. However, the source for this story reportedly and later refused to corroborate their own account published by the Pot Neck News. The suspect named in the article denied having anything to do with the murders of Carla Atkins and Vickie Stout, claiming he was not even in Dover when the murders of Carla and Vickie happened. In June 2014, the suspect and Stewart County Sheriff David Hicks countersued, filing civil litigation against the Pot Neck News publisher Robin Brandon over the story. The civil actions were also filed against investigative reporter David Ross, although he had no involvement in writing the story and did not work for nor had ownership interest in the Pot Neck News. After months winding through the court system, the case was dismissed with prejudice after an undisclosed settlement was reached between the two parties. And also, I want to just make note that the story was pulled after that, and you can still find the Potneck News on the internet. However, any story involving Carla and Vickie was pulled, I think, at the judge's request, and that was part of the agreement between the two parties.
Yeah. And there were other suspects that were actually under investigation for these crimes over the years. Up to 30 individuals were looked at by law enforcement authorities and have cited other individuals as suspects. Murder at Land Between the Lake has not named any of those suspects, but family members want Randall Riggins, who was dating Vickie at the time of the murders, to answer questions they have. Randall, a friend named Bobby Morgan, and the girl's brother Randy were due in court on marijuana charges the day the girls went missing. Riggins has not been and is not now described as a suspect, but the family has questions where his answers might provide useful information. The family also wants to know why Tim Webb would implicate himself in a heinous double murder, knowing he could receive the death penalty just for being present at the killings when they occurred. According to multiple sources, up until his death, Tim Webb continued to tell acquaintances a consistent story of the day that the murders happened. He included details that, if true, could only be known by the police or someone who was present at the crime scene. Possibly could be corroborated by the evidence. Allegations ranging from the murders being the result of the girls' knowledge of drug use and drug sales, the girls possibly being scheduled to testify in nearby Henry County about such activities, and rumors about their dating lives and boyfriends were all part of the fabric of this case for over the past 40 years. In late 2015, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation released a sketch of a witness description of the man in the blue truck the girls were last seen speaking with. The sketch was done shortly after the girls went missing and curiously ran in the newspaper in nearby Paris, Tennessee, but was apparently not distributed in Dover. The sketch was released along with age progressions of the individual. In August 2016, then Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the apprehension, arrest, and conviction of the person or persons responsible for the girls' kidnap and murder.
Hi, I'm Carrie Dedman. I'm Carla and Vickie's niece. Our family is so grateful to Mayor Robin Brandon for the proclamation I'm about to read. In remembrance, Stewart County, Tennessee officially commemorates the unsolved murders of Carla Atkins, 14, and Vickie Stout, 16, that occurred 40 years ago today. Even the most basic details of the case are grisly, and the double shotgun murders of two half-sisters still haunt our community today because they remain unsolved. Carla and Vickie's bodies were discovered by hikers in the Lost Creek area of the Land Between the Lakes on October 5th, 1980. A vigil commemorating the girls will be held this year on Sunday, October 4th, to honor their memory and keep attention focused on the cold case. As Stewart County Mayor, I, Robin Brandon, officially proclaim September 17th, 2020 as Carla Atkins and Vickie Stout Memorial Day, and ask our entire community to remember this case, keep it at the forefront of our thoughts and prayers, and demand justice for Carla and Vickie. This case can be solved, and it's time to shine the brightest possible light on the investigation. We also beseech any citizen with information about the case to come forward. Our county citizens offer our collective thoughts and prayers for resolution and peace to the girls' families and friends. Given under my hand this 17th day of September 2020, signed, the Honorable Robin Brandon, Stewart County Mayor.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we have Dennis Ferrier with us from Channel 17, Fox News Nashville. And so we met, Lainie and I both met Dennis when we were in Dover. And so it's so nice to see you again, Dennis. How are you?
It's great to see you. Doing great. Doing great.
Good. So we actually just wanted to talk to you a little bit about when the first time you reported on Carla and Vickie's disappearance, because now, as you know, we're leading into the days ahead of their 40-year disappearance. So if you could tell us about the first time you heard about their disappearance, and then followed by their murders. Do you remember that time?
Yeah, I do, because I had kind of always specialized in cold cases. I just had a heart for it because I thought it was agonizing. It's bad enough, covering so many murders over my 34-year career was bad enough, just seeing families deal with having a murder. And then the idea that it would be unsolved was just so painful. And I just saw people, just torn apart by it, marriages ending, careers lost. It's a really divisive experience. I worked on cases where, say the mom would want to talk about it all the time and the dad never wanted to talk about it, and it literally ended the marriage over the unsolved, because it was unsolved. One couldn't let it go. One didn't want to talk about it anymore. It actually went way beyond the murder and just actually destroyed the family. So it always had a heart for that. And a lot of times with cold cases, the only thing that would keep them alive is media attention. So I was always willing to. So I think it was around 2000, it was the 20th anniversary, and I was contacted by family members and said, hey, would you help this? Our case is, dead in the water. I got the whole background. And that was 20 years ago. So I did my first story 20 years ago, and I was just trying to help the family by getting the word out, because it does matter, and you never know who will see it or who, because circumstances change. Sometimes the killer is a big bully in the county, and if he's old and infirm, or people aren't afraid of him anymore, let's say he had a stroke, just things where that feeling of menace and fear goes away. Witnesses have come forward in the past and talked. So there's always a chance, that circumstances change.
So after you did that first investigation, the first piece about 20 years ago, what do you feel like came from that?
I think that the most, my theory, and it's not just mine, but it's been kind of backed up by other people in law enforcement that I respect, who are really good at solving. They said whenever there's an unsolved murder like that, something has gone really wrong, really sideways. Because the truth is, most murders are done in, a heat of anger. Mistakes are made. It's way harder, than it looks like, to pull off a perfect murder and not make a mistake like in an Agatha Christie novel or something. Right? It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. And the other thing is with law enforcement too makes mistakes, especially in smaller counties. They have less training. There's things done that are not even intentional sometimes. I was at a murder. There's a famous murder out in McKenzie, and all the neighbors felt bad and went and cleaned up the scene. Well, the family went to the hospital to see if the murder victim would survive, right? They went to the hospital because they died at the hospital. Everyone said, well, they don't need to see this. So they all came and got on their hands and knees and scrubbed the murder scene and completely destroyed the scene. And of course, the police in that small town did not come in and secure the area and say, nobody here. They just kind of got the kid and left. And they never recovered from that. The investigation never recovered from that. So things like that happen. So clearly, a double murder of two teenage girls would just be such a big story in a big city, and it would have been constant scrutiny. But I think that in a small town force that didn't have a lot of crime like that, and they probably got off to a really bad start. And I think you guys know some other things as well, but it just, something went wrong, from the beginning. More than one thing, probably.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, Dennis, that you said, it was 20 years when you covered it, and how cases get such media coverage. And this case, never did get media coverage. when we started this story, it was just disheartening to find that there were no stories. There wasn't much you could find. If you Googled Carla Atkins and Vickie Stout a year ago, you would find very little on their case. I mean, that's how we started it. We wanted to know as much as we could about it before we even started, and there was very little to be found. I mean, we could find your segment, we could find very few articles, and that was it. So when you covered it 20 years ago, it had hardly been touched.
Yeah, right. And, and also the internet, the thing that it does great with like books and old archives of newspapers, but the television stations did not have an internet presence in any way. So
Right.
that stuff would never turn up. Like Channel 4, when I was at Channel 4 at the time I did that story with the NBC station in Nashville. And, they had an archive going back to, World War II right afterwards when the station came on air. But the only place you could find it was in like the catacombs of that television station.
Mm-hmm.
So, there could have been a documentary made on the murder. And you wouldn't know it. It would not have ever pop up on the internet. That stuff was just never entered. None of it. And a lot more exists than you think, but like all those TV, like daily reports,
Right.
they're not there. No one has put them on. I mean,
Yeah.
So it really makes it look worse than it is, because when I did the story in 2000, we went down and found 1980. We found film of the area,
Okay.
right afterwards. Like someone had gone up, but you're right. I mean, it did not get a lot of coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But proximity is a huge thing in television news. And I know people don't talk about it because it seems so unfair and crazy. But if something happens in a big city really close to the stations, it's really easy to follow up constantly, go check. Tabitha Tudors is a famous Nashville missing case. And that, there's probably 600 stories done on that. But it's really easy. There's the dad. He lives down the street. We're going to do it every year, minimum. And when someone's 2 hours away, it's a lot harder to stay on top of that. It takes, you have to be much more intentional. And it's not the same, because you don't, you got 10,000 people out there. So you're not really serving your broader viewer base. I mean, there's a lot of like economic considerations that go in, unless it's something like Holly Bobo, where it's just so outrageous, middle of the day kidnapping or something like that.
Yeah.
And then she was a girl who got a lot of attention too because she was pretty and so middle class, and there's that too. Poor people really don't get the same kind of coverage on murders either.
Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the family reached out to you in 2000, and given that they were obviously not that close and it was a couple hours away from Nashville, what was it about the case that triggered you to say, okay, this is something that I really can make an impact on? Just because of the pain and the family members. I didn't even know if I could, I just know that I'm going to do my best, because there's a need. And it's I believe that there's a public service element, a huge one in my job. I wouldn't do it. I don't do it to be on TV. I actually believe that, we should make a difference and change laws and get bad guys and do all that stuff. So, just the emotional plea of, of the family, like just the suffering made me absolutely want to get it out there. And then, and then you put a story on and you get some more calls, like you guys know exactly how that works more than in spades. So things came, and, a few years later, I talked to the former sheriff up there who I had met, who was now he was in drug enforcement in Dixon. And he had this big theory he wanted to share with me. And I did another story, very veiled, based on his theory that there was a serial killer loose in Middle Tennessee that had probably killed 7 people. And we kind of looked at that. Just because why not? We threw it out there. I mean, because there was the guy that they were talking about is absolutely a killer. Mm-hmm. But how many crimes he committed was hard to say. That might have been, untrue. And I think you know what I'm talking about. But, when someone's killed a couple people, why not look at them for maybe killing a couple more?
Right. Absolutely.
I'll tell you, there was an FBI profiler who was teaching at MTSU back in the 90s. And I got to know her pretty well. And her theory was that 90% of all serial killers were undetected and uncharged. The 90% of serial killers in the United States, because the idea of killing a random person for no particular reason is absolutely the way to get away with a murder.
That's frightening. I mean, that's absolutely frightening.
90%.
It's like they walk among us, right?
Yeah, because if they kill,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not where you look, you're like, who was jealous, who they owe money, and then it leads you to the killer. But if it's just really, truly random and a joy killing, man, it's hard, where are you going to connect it if you don't have physical evidence, or your police force isn't very good
Right.
at collecting and preserving evidence, which we've seen for sure.
And if a serial killer jumps from state to state, starts crossing state lines, I mean, that's when like they finally start putting other things into place, where like CODIS and different things. But, back 40 years ago, that didn't exist.
No, not at all. And like you said, you even on your internet search, I mean, it's, like even like people like my parents are older, and I mean, they're not on the internet in any way, but they had like very productive lives and did lots of things. My dad played college sports. You can't find that. It's like, there anything, a lot of stuff just doesn't exist,
Yeah, if you don't have that hard copy, like it's like that piece isn't there anymore. Yeah. But when you talk about law enforcement, Dennis, when you're doing the Ferrier files, do you get much support from the local departments, or do you have to get it from more like your information from the locals?
Well, it just depends on the situation. Like, I mean, you're absolutely going to get nothing from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation of the state of Tennessee, right? They don't help media ever. I mean, they just don't. Okay. And then their files are sealed in perpetuity, which is a really horrible thing. And a lot of people don't like that, because it also makes them very hard to hold accountable when they can hold a file, like on these girls for 40 years and no one else can even look at it. So you don't even know what they did or didn't do. So it's a very controversial thing to give these people that kind of protection. And a lot of district attorneys, let me tell you, a lot of district attorneys are very much against it. Now, they might not come out and say it, because think about it, they're using them, you're using their crime lab. It isn't like they can go on television and say it's an absolute outrage that the TBI's files are sealed forever and then work with them the next day. That's right. It's going to be very awkward. And so they don't. But I'm here to tell you, without a doubt, there are district attorneys that hate it. There are law enforcement groups, especially, that absolutely think it's absurd. And it really helps them keep these things, you just don't know. Like Carla and Vickie, you just don't know what's in their file. You don't know how good it is or how bad it is.
Right.
Because it's a secret forever. And I heard at one point the district attorneys had put their toe in the water, and they said, we're going to see about making them public after 25 years. They thought, let's pick a really good long time, because we got to start somewhere. And then a lot of people who would be super offended would be dead or retired. But that didn't even get any traction.
Yeah.
In 25 years after an unsolved crime, you understand what I'm saying? Even a solved crime, it's closed forever.
Oh, so even solved is closed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
And the only time you ever find out anything is if it goes to trial. And thus the Holly Bobo debacle, where the TBI completely blew the case, was fighting about everything.
Right.
Made mistake after mistake. That only came out because they had to prove that in the trial as part of explaining what happened and what really happened. So that's like one of the few times where it only comes out if it goes to trial, their cases.
All right. That's all fascinating. I didn't know that, especially about a solved case. And I know that
solved case, nothing. Yeah, forever.
And I have heard about plenty of people petitioning and trying to get those files unsealed, especially after so many years. And like you said, 40 years is crazy that family can see, or
people don't know what are in those files.
So all it can be is if there's a change in the law. And that's why they floated the idea to change. And it all started because a lot of in the early history of the TBI, they were investigating lawmakers. They're the ones who investigate lawmakers for stealing money, for fraud, for unscrupulous. So the lawmakers were really quick to let them seal those forever because they didn't want any of their stuff coming out ever. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that, right? Because they're like, well, they're the ones investigating us. We don't want this stuff to ever come out. So, I mean, it was really self-serving and nefarious of the legislature to so quickly grant them, permanent privacy on their files but they did it because they didn't want their own junk coming out when one of them got in trouble, which happened again this year. So, I mean, it happens.
Yeah. Do you know how many states have that same kind of law, or is Tennessee very unique with that?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't just because it's, it's a really good question. And if there were very few states doing it, that would be really a reason to change it. So that's a good idea. That's a good story to look into. Who else is doing this?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the next Dennis Ferrier file story.
Yeah, you've given me a good one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like what is, the Kentucky State Police, they're their big investigation, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, wherever you go, everybody's got some kind of state investigative police to some degree.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Do you think this case can be solved?
Well, any case can be solved. I mean, there's time works time works for you for a while, and then it works against you. I think most of these cases are solved within a week.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the average time is, but it's quick. It's a week. Yeah. And then the ones that linger, and then you have witnesses die, they get old and addled. I know there's some witnesses in this case that would never really completely come forward into the light of day and say, and so that hurt. I mean, that's why I think 40 years, and with the evidence problems on the scene, I mean, of course it could be solved because, gosh, anything can happen, I mean, just
right.
But it, it seems more unlikely every year. Not more likely, more unlikely, and pretty soon it, won't even. I mean,
yeah. What do you think about advances in DNA testing and technology of that sort actually being a benefit to the case at this point in time?
It just depends on what the evidence is, which I don't know. I know that recently in Grundy County, they had a fingerprint on a door, and they couldn't read it, and they retested it 12 years later with new technology, and it matched.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it was even better than solving a murder because they had the wrong guy in jail, and they had to release him, who had been in jail for 14 years, Adam Brazil.
Yeah. Okay.
And they had to release him based on that finger. That fingerprint is what released him. And that was the retesting of an old piece of evidence. So your question is, yeah, there's all kinds of new technology, but what is the evidence and what is the quality of evidence? And I mean, I really, the DA in this case, Ray Crouch, is pretty aggressive and a very law and order guy. I mean, you would think that he would really want things retested. He's
right.
A younger guy. He doesn't have friends from this all the things that slow cases down. I mean, he's not connected in it. I mean, it just seemed like he would use it if it was possible, but it's also secret. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. You actually said that, the fingerprinting. I spoke with someone that worked with DNA, and they said that the fingerprinting has actually come further along than DNA. I don't know if that's correct or not, but now, like you said, they can pull partial prints off of almost anything dating way back. So I don't know if that's true that actually fingerprinting has come further than DNA even, but having both of those together can solve whole cases, I think.
Yeah, there's a big, like, nationwide murder case that I'm working on, and I think that the guy in jail didn't do it. His name's Major Kit Martin. He was an American Airlines pilot, and he's accused of triple murder. And they said, oh, hundreds of things trying to connect his DNA, and none of them came back positive. And then, of course, then the defense wants it and says, well, let us test it, because you're trying to make sure you're looking for one person. But like the other side, maybe, well, let's see whose it is. If it's not me, who is it? And they damaged and mishandled the evidence, and it's untestable. And that's another problem. You know, you keep handling this evidence, eventually sometimes a lot of the really good stuff becomes untestable. And so then the new technology doesn't even help you because you've mishandled, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I mean, they had people like take stuff has happened. Like there was the woman was killed in a sweater, and they had a handbag from a different scene, and they took the sweater and put it on the handbag for a minute. Well, that's a contamination, because now there will be sweater fibers on that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the wallet of the guy they think had it, you've actually like framed somebody inadvertently, because you've taken evidence from the dead person and put it on something that belonged to the suspect.
Yeah.
Now everything's out the window. So even if he did it now, you've done worse, because you've destroyed the evidence. You can't use any of that. It's all gone. And that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
That just happened like 3 years ago on a piece of evidence, you know?
Yeah.
People are already trying to send stuff off.
Yeah. And the last thing we would ever want is the wrong person to go to jail, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't follow the Curtis Flowers case out of Mississippi. He was just, I think it was just 2 days ago. Yeah, I followed that case for years. And that guy spent 23 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. And they just dropped his case the other day. So that was super exciting for him. And we don't want the wrong person to go to jail for this. You know, I guess you're innocent until you're found guilty, but someone should pay for these crimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're so far from the wrong person. I mean, we don't have anybody
You're right.
even close. So yeah. And I think at this point, I think that would be pretty unlikely, because after 40 years, that's the other thing. You have to have a really good case to convict, you know, or arrest.
I think that's a really good point, Amelia, though. It's not like we're looking to have somebody pay for these crimes. We're looking for the right person and to know what really happened and bring justice for Carla and Vickie. And I think that's definitely an important nuance.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic thing to try to do at this point, you know. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, thank you for coming on today. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you both.
Yes, thank you for your time. This was wonderful.
Yeah, it's great talking to you. I always enjoy it. So anytime.
Sure, and hopefully we'll be back your way again and we can catch up.
Yeah, that'll be great.
So we were fortunate to be able to have some time with Dennis Ferrier from Fox 17 News. Amelia and I had actually done a segment with him when we went to visit Dover several months ago. What did you think of Dennis's interview?
So I always appreciate talking to Dennis.
Yeah.
He's been also a wealth of information over this last year, and, you know, a big personality he is. He's always so much fun to chat with. And I think he was taught us something we didn't know. I didn't know that Tennessee files are always closed. Even with a case closed, you can't access those files. So I thought it was important to know that those files aren't being, held purposely. Mm-hmm. Like they're just not available.
Yeah.
So
it's the law.
Right. It is what it is. So when we're always complaining and we're always like, why can't we get those files? It is what it is. Like we're not ever going to get those files. Yeah. So that was important to know that the efforts we keep putting forward trying to get those files. I would like to see it change, like he said. And I know that other reporters I've talked to in the past, another reporter I speak with often, he really wants to get that changed as well. And maybe one day there will be a time, like Dennis said, 25 years he thinks is a good, good starting point. Mm-hmm. But in 40 years is a long time. But I mean, maybe there's reasons they hold those files. I mean, I don't know. But I thought Dennis it was always fun to talk to him, and I really appreciated him coming on.
Yeah, me too.
So, hi everyone, we're back here with Michelle Steely-Seals,
And Michelle is a family member. She's cousin to Carla and Vickie. Michelle, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your relationship to the girls? So thank you again for joining us, by the way.
Yes. Hey, thank you for having me. And let me start off by saying just how much we appreciate all this.
Oh, thanks, Michelle.
This has gotten more attention in the last year than it has in the last 39 years. And though it's pretty phenomenal. So I really appreciate that. And everybody does. So to start off my relationship with the girls, I am a first cousin to Carla. My mother's brother married their mother, and they already had, well, Miss Nell already had several children when they married, and then she had, with my uncle, a son and a daughter, which was Carla and Joel. So they're actually my first cousins by blood, and then the rest of them were, by marriage.
Okay, how old were you when Carla and Vickie went missing?
I was 7. On September the 17th, when they went missing, I was 7 years old, and 5 days later, I turned 8.
Okay. Do you remember that time well?
I do remember it. As far as the girls, I don't remember that, but I just remember, I remember when that happened and just how the turmoil, of everything was. This was my mother's niece that went missing, and I can remember her, I remember a lot of the sadness that followed during. So yes, that's what I remember the most.
Now, did you live in Dover at the time?
I lived in Stewart County. Actually, the little town that I lived in was about 10 miles out of Dover towards Houston County, the little area called Carlisle.
Okay. Mm-hmm. During that time, do you remember like you being scared, or your family? Did they keep it from you? Were you being sheltered during that time, or?
They talked about it. I always remember them talking about it. As far as being sheltered, yeah, because like this, I knew it as being able to, we had 2 little stores in our community, and I can remember as a kid being able to walk to those 2 stores. Mm-hmm. And, you'd have to get on the highway to walk down there to them, and I could go to the store, and that all changed when all this happened. My sister Lori, she played basketball, and she would run on the highway, for training and conditioning, and that all had to stop. My dad was especially, no, you can't be out running on the road, something like this can really happen now, we can't afford to lose y'all too, so.
Yeah. So
a lot changed after that. So yeah, my parents probably became more protective of us since that. You say this will never happen in your town, especially a little town like Dover. Well, it did, and it was almost 40 years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, that changes a small town. I mean, that can
big time. Mm-hmm. And I don't imagine it was so much for us. I would imagine for a lot of families, they probably thought, well, who picks up 2 girls and takes them off and they're never seen again, until 3 weeks later, ultimately. So, they were dead. So I imagine not just for our family, but I imagine a lot of the families in the community were probably, parents were thinking the same thing. We got to keep a close eye on our kids now.
Yeah, rethinking the activities they'll let them do on their own.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what is I know you've been now involved in keeping the case alive and the top of people's minds. What is it that you have found has been the most, I don't know, compelling reason to keep this going? Is it because of the girls and the fear that this may have instilled in the community, or is it because their family? Is it because it's the town that you live in? I mean, there's a lot of, I guess, different factors potentially.
Of course, the first and foremost, it's my family. And probably I want to do it for my mom.
Yeah.
This is my mother's niece, and so it kind of gets hard. And I really want to do it for her. So, but and I want justice to happen for them. They deserve this. They were 14 and 16-year-old girls, and their life was cut short, and that's not fair. So that's what really drives me. So.
Yeah, no, we feel the same way.
Yeah.
Not fair.
Right.
And I think sometimes we
get at them, and they could have really been something, but they never got the chance. So we can't give it back to them, but we can sure keep their voice heard.
Mm-hmm.
You're an amazing voice for them too, Michelle. We've been you and following you for some time now, and you've been an amazing family member and voice for these girls. And that's what we try to also remember as well, that they were two young teenagers. They weren't doing anything wrong. They didn't do anything to deserve that. They didn't do anything to hurt anyone. Two young, beautiful girls that, like you said, had an amazing life ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could have been anything they wanted to be, but they never got the chance. Apparently, for a selfish reason, their lives were taken. And, and who knows what kind of life this person that did this, what kind of life are they living? Are they living some elaborate life, or, I hope not, but I mean, they could be. They probably went on with their life just like, like it was nothing, and got to go on with their daily thing, So that, that's always in the back of my mind. What kind of life are they living? Or he or she, whoever did this, what kind of life are they living? Right. I hope it's in the back of their mind every day. I hope they think about this every day, just like we do.
Do you feel that there is still a potential that these crimes will be solved? The killer will be arrested?
I sure do. I really do. And I've probably felt it more this past year. I really do. Mm-hmm.
What would you like to see happen in this next year? We would have liked to have seen more happen before this, the end of this month happened. I would think a lot has happened this last year, but what would you like to happen within the year?
In the next year, that possibly, that the Parabon may be getting going more, and we can get some DNA and can, just keep going forward. That's what I just hope it just always keeps going forward until we get an answer. I hope we never have to spin our wheels ever again, because that's where we had been prior. We were always spinning our wheels. It felt like we would get so far, and then like the 2-step forward, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It's the way it always felt.
Right.
But I think so far we've always stayed a step forward every time this past year. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I'd like for it to keep going.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the upcoming Vigil?
Yeah, so we have the Vigil, which we've been doing since year 35. We've been having a Vigil of some sort, whether it be just the family getting together. The first year we ever had it, we had it a community-wide. We had it right in town, and it went really good, and we've just always been able to have some sort of a get-together for the family, especially together. But this year, we are going to have it on October the 4th. We'll be at the Stewart County Visitor Center starting at 2 o'clock. We'll be there till however long everybody wants to stay. So we want to encourage family, friends, everybody to come and talk with us, talk about Carla and Vickie. They have something that they want to tell us. We hope we encourage it. But we are going to have something from them for every year from now on.
That's good. And I think you're right too. That's something that we have to keep doing, and not just talk about Carla and Vickie when, you know, the time comes around every September. I think we just have to keep their names in the public all the time. Like, just keep talking about, keep their names out there, and until answers are found, you know, until we put someone behind bars.
Right. Absolutely.
And you never know when somebody's going to be ready or willing to share what they know.
Right.
So
yeah.
think that's an amazing thing that you're doing, because
any day somebody's going to just come up and say, I have something to tell. I know something that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, you know, I think we're just going to get a big surprise one day, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we can hope for, right? Mm-hmm. We can always keep that hope.
Mm-hmm. And too, talking about the Vigil, we would have loved to have had it October the 5th, which is the day the girls were found. But the 4th is on a Sunday, so that's why we chose that day. So we was hope that maybe a lot more people could come on that day. So, but and y'all are going to air the 17th, correct?
Yes.
Good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This is the 17th, right? We wish we could come down for the vote, but I think probably more so because of COVID and just our kids in school, I don't think we're going to be able to make it down for the Vigil, but that would have been nice to, well.
Yeah, but we know y'all are going to be there with us in spirit, so we know.
Yeah, definitely will be.
Yeah, no, you'll be there anyway, so.
Well, Michelle, thanks for coming on. It was so good to see you again.
Yes, y'all too. I wish we could see you in person, but this is pretty neat right here.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to see you in person again sometime soon.
I hope so too. So great to talk to y'all.
All right, Michelle. Thank you. Have a great night, and we'll be in touch very soon.
Thank you. See you later.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
So Amelia, what did you think about Michelle's interview?
Michelle's interview was so heartfelt and just sweet. I mean, you can tell how much she cares about her family and how much, you know, she's been one of the driving forces of helping find justice for the family. And, you know, I just really appreciate, you know, how much Michelle's been supportive of us and the podcast. And, you know, meeting her in Dover was also, it was really great to put a face with a name. And so I really appreciate Michelle and all her help. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm just really inspired by her passion and her dedication to continuing to focus on keeping the girls' spirit alive through the vigils that they're hosting every year. And really, like you said, the dedication that she's had to really solving this case because of the love of her family.
Yeah, it was a great interview. Thank you for listening to Murder at Land Between the Lakes, special episode 40 Years Later. Tune in tomorrow night to listen to part 2, where we'll be featuring Mayor Robin Brandon, Mayor of Stewart County, and childhood friend Ruby Wooten. If you have any information, please call 1-800-TBI-FIND. That's 1-800-824-346. Or you can call us at 609-429-0371. That's 609-429-0371.